In part 1 of this series, we examined how Jehovah's Witnesses have redefined what a lie is, the doctrine of theocratic warfare, and how they are to hide the truth from God's enemies. We viewed testimony by a Bethel branch lawyer and a declaration to the Superior Court of California by governing body member Garrett Loesch, stating that he does not answer to Watchtower. Let's begin part 2 with a clip from a radio interview.
Robert Hendriks, National Spokesperson for Jehovah's Witnesses. So, Robert, tell me a little bit more about Jehovah's Witnesses' beliefs and surrounding marriage in particular. Is it permitted for someone to date or marry someone outside of the religion?
You know, that's a great question. Is it permitted? The answer is yes, because really we don't micromanage our friends. They make their own choices. Is it a good choice to marry someone who is not a Jehovah's Witness? Well, that's really up to the individual.
There have been many articles and talks about marrying only in the Lord. The March 15, 1982 Questions from Readers asks, how should individual Christians and the congregation as a whole view the Bible advice to marry only in the Lord? Because Jehovah's Witnesses as a people view this counsel as wise and serious, they do not want to contribute to anyone's going contrary to it. For example, if because of weakness a spiritual brother or sister began to court or date a person who was not a witness of Jehovah, the others in the congregation would hardly want to encourage that by socializing with the unbeliever. They agree with the Bible that the non-Christian is not a good associate, but what if a witness planned to disregard God's advice and to marry someone who was not a baptized witness? Unless there was some exceptional reason, brothers in the congregation would not want to solemnize such an unequal yoking, nor would the Kingdom Hall be available for the wedding. It is available for marriages of two baptized Christians who are marrying only in the Lord, or it might sometimes be used by two persons who are regularly serving God as part of the congregation and who will soon be baptized. By not allowing the Kingdom Hall to be used by a witness who plans to become unevenly yoked with an unbeliever, the congregation elders can underscore the seriousness of God's counsel to marry only in the Lord. But technically, marrying someone that is not a Jehovah's Witness is not a disfellowshipping offense. Is that the generous interpretation for something being permitted in the religion? As long as you are disfellowshipped for it. The July 15, 1982 Watchtower writes, we also find Bible rules on matters that are not disfellowshipping offenses. For example, Paul wrote that single Christians should marry only in the Lord. Someone might reason, since I would not be expelled for disobeying that advice, these must not be serious rules. What unwise thinking! God views these rules as serious. Did not Paul tell the Thessalonians to mark and stop associating with lazy persons, willfully disobeying the rule about working? It's interesting how Jehovah's Witnesses don't consider breaking a clear-cut biblical rule as being a disfellowshipping offense. Do they arbitrarily choose what's worthy of disfellowshipping and what isn't? Regardless, whether it's a disfellowshipping offense or not, there are consequences for marrying outside the religion. Let's read what their secret elders manual, Shepherd the Flock of God, has to say. In chapter 12, under the subheading, Marking Disorderly Ones, it states, for example, if a baptized Christian is dating an unbeliever, the elder should first counsel him and try to help him. If he persists in disregarding Bible principles in spite of repeated admonition, the body of elders may decide that a warning talk should be given to the congregation. If an individual is dating an unbaptized publisher, a warning talk may not be needed. Much would depend on the circumstances, on the attitude of the Christian, on the level of disturbance to the congregation, and other factors. Nonetheless, if he is dating with a view to marrying someone who is unbaptized, he is not obeying the Bible's counsel at 1 Corinthians 7 verse 39 to marry only in the Lord, and loving counsel should be given. If the disorderly one is moved to change, the elders can individually decide to resume personal socializing with him. This will indicate to the congregation that they consider that the individual is no longer marked. Not only is the person who dates or marries a worldly person marked with a warning talk and faced with restricted socializing in the congregation, but those that support the couple by simply attending the wedding face repercussions as well. In the chapter entitled Appointment and Deletion of Elders and Ministerial Servants, under the subheading Situations that Require a Review of an Appointed Brother's Qualifications, it states states, supports the marriage of a baptized Christian to an unbaptized person. An appointed man should be loyal to Jehovah's standards, including the scriptural command to marry only in the Lord, that is, to marry a dedicated baptized Christian. This command applies to all Christians, including those who are inactive. Questions about an appointed brother's qualifications would result if he encouraged or gave unspoken approval to such a marriage. For example, by supporting the courtship or by supporting, attending, or participating in the wedding or wedding reception. A brother's qualifications should also be reviewed if he did not get involved personally but allowed his wife or others in his household to do so. If an elder or a ministerial servant displays poor judgment in these areas to a degree that it raises serious questions in the minds of others, he may be scripturally disqualified from serving. Does losing privileges in the congregation, being marked as disorderly, and having the congregation restrict socializing sound like marrying outside the Jehovah's Witness religion is permitted to you? Just because it's not a disfellowshipping offense, does that make it permissible? Before we continue to the next example, let's read this FAQ from jw.org. Do Jehovah's Witnesses shun those who used to belong to their religion? Those who were baptized as Jehovah's Witnesses but no longer preach to others, perhaps even drifting away from association with fellow believers, are not shunned. In fact, we reach out to them and try to rekindle their spiritual interest. The first paragraph doesn't address the question, so why put that irrelevant part in it all? Look what happens when you search "Do Jehovah's Witnesses shun" in some search engines. It takes the first paragraph as its source and uses it as the snippet in the search results. Now, if someone comes across this article in the results, they will only see "they do not shun" unless they click and investigate further. The second paragraph in the FAQ is important because it includes a synonym for disfellowshipping. We do not automatically disfellowship someone who commits a serious sin. If, however, a baptized witness makes a practice of breaking the Bible's moral code and does not repent, he or she will be shunned or disfellowshipped. The Bible clearly states, "Remove the wicked man from among yourselves." What if a man who is disfellowshipped, but whose wife and children are still Jehovah's Witnesses? The religious ties he had with his family change, but blood ties remain. The marriage relationship and normal family affections and dealings continue. More on that in a bit. In the September 15, 1981 Watchtower states, "Yes, the Bible commands Christians not to keep company or fellowship with a person who has been expelled from the congregation. Thus, disfellowshipping is what Jehovah's Witnesses appropriately call the expelling and subsequent shunning of such an unrepentant wrongdoer." Now, with those facts from their own publications in mind, let's continue. This November 2019 article is from Sheboygan Press in Wisconsin, USA. It's entitled, "Shunned in Sheboygan, a former Jehovah's Witness shares her story." It relates this experience. While Bautista and many people on YouTube describe their experiences being shunned by their Jehovah's Witness communities, Hendriks, the church's U.S. spokesman, said shunning isn't part of the religion. "We don't shun," Hendriks said. "Shunning would be cutting somebody off and pretending they don't exist. That's just not the case." Here he redefines what shunning is. The secular definition doesn't mean pretending they don't exist. It means to avoid deliberately. That's a nuanced but very important difference. But that's what the Public Information Department manual essentially coaches these spokesmen to say. The article continues, "Elders are encouraged to stay in touch with disfellowshipped people and to approach them if they see them in public or at meetings," Hendriks said. "Disfellowshipping," he said, "is an act of love and considered a form of shepherding." Bautista said elders had minimal contact with her, mostly related to her efforts to be reinstated. When she saw them in public, she said, they wouldn't acknowledge her. Again, the spokesman is likely just going off the Public Information Department manual, but let's read a letter sent sent to the elders in February 2017, well before this interview. The governing body has determined that there is no longer a need for a formal arrangement to visit disfellowshipped or disassociated individuals each year. Rather, elders should use good judgment in determining when and how to make brief contact with disfellowshipped or disassociated individuals. While shopping, an elder may see a disfellowshipped person who has not been contacted in years and choose to approach him. According to this letter, no, elders are not encouraged to stay in touch. The formal arrangement was dissolved, and it's up to an individual elder's judgment when and how to make brief contact. If they are seen in public, an elder may choose to approach. Does that sound like they are encouraged to stay in touch with those who have been disfellowshipped or have disassociated? Or has the governing body absolved responsibility by leaving it to local elders to decide on their own? Other than elders, members aren't instructed on how to treat disfellowshipped people, Hendriks said. Everybody makes their own decision, he said. Members aren't instructed how to treat disfellowshipped people? The August 2002 Kingdom Ministry does exactly that under the subheading, How to Treat Expelled Ones. It also states to avoid spiritual as well as social fellowship. This would rule out joining him in a picnic, party, ball game, or a trip to the mall or theater, or sitting down to a meal with him either in the home or at a restaurant. Notice the question for paragraphs 3 and 4. What sort of fellowship with disfellowshipped and disassociated people is forbidden? The article continues. Commenting on this, the Watchtower of September 15, 1981, page 25 says, a simple hello to someone can be the first step that develops into a conversation and maybe even a friendship. Would we want to take that first step with a disfellowshipped person? The April 15, 2015 Watchtower in the article, Why Disfellowshipping is a Loving Provision writes, all in the congregation can show principled love by avoiding contact and conversation with the disfellowshipped person. They thus reinforce the discipline that Jehovah has given him through the elders. I don't know what sort of mental contortions a Jehovah's Witness would need to make to find the truth in the statement, members aren't instructed on how to treat disfellowshipped people. Maybe that particular sentence wasn't a direct quote, seeing that PID had been instructed not to use the word members out of legal concern. As for the second part, everybody makes their own decision. That's technically true, but again, there are very real consequences if someone makes the decision to associate with someone that's disfellowshipped or disassociated. The Shepherd the Flock of God book states this, though this is not an exhaustive list, reasoned conduct may be involved in the following. If the wrongdoer has an insolent, contemptuous attitude made evident by a practice of these things, unnecessary association with disfellowshipped or disassociated individuals, willful, continued, unnecessary association with disfellowshipped or disassociated non-relatives despite repeated counsel would warrant judicial action. Judicial action means they would be subject to being disfellowshipped and shunned themselves. The thing that we want most is for that person to come back, Hendriks said. He isn't aware of any statistics on how often people are disfellowshipped, he said, but in his experience, it's been an infrequent occurrence, with some congregations going years without it happening. He isn't aware of any statistics? How odd. They certainly kept statistics and even used to publish some. In the July 1st, 1992 Watchtower, it said that in recent years, disfellowshippings worldwide have been approximately 1% of publishers. Is that 1% applicable today? With 8.5 million publishers, that would be approximately 85,000 people disfellowshipped each year. How many of those are reinstated? Watchtower keeps recent statistics to themselves, but they did give us a peek back in the 1974 Watchtower. In the 10-year period between 1963 to 1973, of the 36,671 that were disfellowshipped, only 14,508 returned, or just under 40%. The majority did not return. Keeping with the 1% disfellowshipping rate, with 60% not returning, if 85,000 witnesses were disfellowshipped last year, approximately 51,000 of them would not return. Next is a clip from the Canadian Supreme Court. The case was featured in an article on jw.org. The lawyer is a Jehovah's Witness.
A committee of 4 elders met with him with the goal of spiritual restoration. They wanted to have him repent from his sins. As the meeting progressed with Mr. Wall, the elders came to the decision that Mr. Wall was not sufficiently repentant for his disgraceful conduct, and the congregation elders took the decision to disfellowship him. That word is used by Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses don't use the word shun or shunning.
He or she will be shunned or disfellowshipped. He or she will be shunned or disfellowshipped. He or she will be shunned or disfellowshipped.
They refer to it as disfellowship, disfellowshipping, disfellowshipped, because that really gives the sense of what's taking place within this particular religious community. Disfellowship literally means no further spiritual fellowship with the individual. And as I point out, sorry, Chief Justice, as I point out at paragraph 22 of my factum, the nature of the relationship then of a disfellowshipped person is not completely shunned. The disfellowshipped person is able to come into the congregation, to the congregation meetings. They're able to attend in the Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses. They're able to sit wherever they like. They can sing the spiritual songs with the congregation. As far as their family members are concerned, normal family relations continue with the exception of spiritual fellowship. And the door is not closed to Mr. Wall either. The person who is disfellowshipped can, after a period of time, ask to be reinstated in the congregation, because that's the purpose of the discipline.
Let me play devil's advocate here, pardon the expression. In the entire Shepherd the Flock of God Elders Manual, the word shun is not found, even once. Is that the technicality used here to assert that Jehovah's Witnesses don't use the word shun or shunning? How about the statement that normal family relations continue? That's technically true. The Shepherd the Flock of God book states this: if a publisher in the congregation is known to have unnecessary association with disfellowshipped or disassociated relatives who are not in the household, elders should use the scriptures to counsel and reason with him. He would not be dealt with judicially unless there is persistent spiritual association, or he persists in openly criticizing the disfellowshipping decision. And they have stated that normal family relations continue in some other publications. For example, in the Keep Yourselves in God's Love book, in the appendix entitled How to Treat a Disfellowshipped Person, it comments, in some instances, the disfellowshipped family member may still be living in the same home as part of the immediate household. Since his being disfellowshipped does not sever the family ties, normal day-to-day family activities and dealings may continue. In other cases, the disfellowshipped relative may be living outside the immediate family circle and home. Although there might be a need for limited contact on some rare occasion to care for a necessary family matter, any such contact should be kept to a minimum. Loyal Christian family members do not look for excuses to have dealings with a disfellowshipped relative not living at home. Can you see how technically the statements made were true? But at the same time, the organization also prints articles like this from the August 2002 Kingdom Ministry. The Watchtower of April 15, 1991, in the footnote on page 22 states, if in a Christian's household there is a disfellowshipped relative, that one would still be part of the normal day-to-day household dealings and activities. Thus, it would be left up to members of the family to decide on the extent to which the disfellowshipped family member would be included when eating or engaging in other household activities, and yet they would not want to give brothers with whom they associate the impression that everything is the same as it was before the disfellowshipping occurred. The statement, thus it would be left up to members of the family to decide, is quite insidious, because look at what messages these members of the family are bombarded with. The December 2020 Life and Ministry Meeting Workbook wrote, our loyalty to Jehovah can be greatly tested when a loved one is disfellowshipped. Jehovah's instruction to Aaron provides a clear message to those who must cut off association with the disfellowshipped relative. Our love for Jehovah must be stronger than our love for unfaithful family members. What's twisted in citing Aaron's example is that his sons Nadab and Abihu were killed by fire, and Aaron was instructed to not display any signs of sadness. And they reinforce that message of cutting off family members with dramas like this.
I ended up getting disfellowshipped.
Sonia Erickson has been disfellowshipped.
It crushed my whole family.
Okay, to continue the meeting, we may remember last month's Thursday.
Later, my father explained to me that I couldn't remain in the home because I refused to change my lifestyle. He told me I was having a negative effect on my younger brother and sister. Then I'm out of this house. I was determined to do what I wanted. I didn't even care that my parents' hearts were breaking. They loved me and wanted me to come back to Jehovah. I tried to contact them. I just wanted to talk and to hear their voice. I missed being with my family. And they thought about reaching out to me. But they knew that if they had associated with me, even a little, just to check on me, that small dose of association might have satisfied me. It could have made me think that there was no need to return to Jehovah.
Watchtower can wash their hands clean and let the congregants enforce shunning of their family members all by themselves, even though technically, according to their elders' book, they are permitted to speak to family members living at home and relatives outside the home as long as it's not spiritually related, and they are not openly criticizing the disfellowshipping arrangement. As for the lawyers stating that disfellowshipped people can sit anywhere they want in the Kingdom Hall, that's true. But from my experience, and even in the drama we just saw, those who are disfellowshipped usually sit in the back of the hall or in the second school, arriving right before or after the meeting starts, and leaving right before or after the meeting ends. What's technically true isn't always what's done in practice. In the next part of this series, we'll look at more examples, including a Jehovah's Witness lawyer who was sanctioned for what the plaintiff described as false statements and intentionally misleading statements. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Thank you all for watching, and see you in the next video.